Welcome back. And today we're going to welcome back a special guest, the Blon BL-03. So when I did a first video, I think I finished it saying I was probably going to go back and revisit it. And sometime between doing that and the Inu audio store on Amazon had contacted me and said, hey, we're going to start carrying the Blon. Are you interested? And I said, yep. And this was before the Chinese national holiday, and then things happen, and so here we are. The Inu audio store on Amazon is now carrying the Blon BL-03, and there's a little discount on it, and in return I think everyone else on Amazon has a little discount on it, so it seemed like a good time to put this out if you're interested in picking it up, because everyone has it on a little bit of a discount, which is pretty good. It hasn't been discounted on Amazon at all. So there you go. It's $38.99, $2 coupon for you. So as part of going back and revisiting the Blon BL-03, I think I wanted to start over with some of the things I learned the first time doing it, because it's not quite as straightforward as like your normal KZ ZSX. You pull it out of the box and plug it in and go. So I put together a couple questions that I wanted to kind of go through before we get to the review part of it. And so number one, is the Blon special? And the answer is yeah, it's special in that everyone says it sounds like a random $200 IAM that I don't have, right? It sounds like the Oxygen, it sounds like, Sennheiser, it sounds like all these different things, all way more expensive than $38.99. So that's kind of the first reason why people say it's special. People kind of say, well, its sound signature sounds like this and that. A lot of those this and that's I don't have, so I can't really say it sounds like anything to me other than it sounds amazing. I will say that. So special, yes. Can you put your finger on what makes it special? Not exactly, but I think the consensus is it sounds like the Oxygen is what people kind of go through, and I think the dynamic driver itself is graphene, I think, and these and the shell itself was another special metal, which I forgot what they called it. This is what the box looks like when you get it, and yes, it does say belief, let music burn, opportunity, and never give up. Annotation for music and drams. So yes, that is the same box they still use. So the second question people ask is, do I need to buy new tips? And the answer is yes, and I forgot to bring my original tips with me, but the original tips are super small and super thin, and you won't get a good seal on it. So these happen to be the ones that I'm using right now. These are some memory foams from Amazon, cheap pack. They're actually Rios, and I think they were about $7 for 6 pairs of them. And you just kind of slide them on. So before I had these memory foams, I actually was using, I think, KZ Starlines. And to get the Starlines to work best, and how people started talking about the Blon originally, was they were putting little O-rings. So this little rubber ring is actually a piece of the original Blon earpiece, just the stem that I cut off just to, prevent the tip from sliding too far down, because that's kind of what you want. If it slides too far down, it'll sound kind of wacky as well, and that won't be good. Let me see if this will actually work. But once you have the little O-ring on there, then you can kind of slide this on there, and then you end up with slightly more extension than you had before, and this won't push down too far, getting too close to the grill and all that stuff, and that affects the sound as well. So that was a good solution. I don't know, I just stuck with the memory foams, but either one will work, and you should keep on rolling these things until you find one that works best for you and sounds the best for you. Do I need to buy the cable? So actually on my this is what I typically have on my Blon, and it's the 16 core, nice HCK, copper. But this is the stock cable that comes with it, and it's, you know, it's kind of a rubber coated black 4-core. And what's different about it is it kind of looks like QDC, but not QDC. You probably won't be able to actually see this, but the corners are actually square. QDC is they're rounded. So if you actually buy a QDC cable and try to plug it in, the corners will not fit in, and you'll be sad. So that's why I use a 2-pin, or you can shave off the corners here and make them round, and then a QDC will work. I haven't tried that, but that's the story on it. So short answer is no, you don't need to buy a new cable. The cable will work. What most people complain about, and what I complain about, is this is a bit tight, and as you wrap it around your ear, it'll tend to try to tug on the earbud a little bit and make it loose, and you lose your seal a little bit. So that is why I switched cables, and other people have the same problem. So yeah, so I would if you go and buy it, I would stick with the stock cable and use it for a while, and it'll either work for you or won't work for you. So is it neutral tuned? Yes, and if you watch my other videos, I usually say I don't particularly like neutral tuned headsets all that much, but it is. But the exception is the bass is actually kind of stronger than normal. It's boosted a little bit, so you can say it's neutral, but it's not quite. It's, you know, having the bass boosted works in my favor. That's probably why I like it more than normal for a neutral tuned. But in general, that was what they were shooting for. Depending on what tips and what cable you use, you can kind of tweak the amount of bass kind of coming through. So I tend to go for more. And we'll kind of get into that a little bit later as to that bit. Is it better than the ZSX? It is different than the ZSX. And for a lot of the same reasons that I like the ZSX with its strong bass, the ZSX is definitely more U-shaped, so you kind of get a boost at other sides. But does this sound just as good on the same songs? Pretty much, and that's kind of why I say you should actually buy both. It's very complementary to the ZSX. The same songs that you like in the ZSX will sound really amazing, and you'll probably hear slightly different things because the soundstage is actually better on this. And that kind of is one of my points of, I love that an amazing soundstage, and I think the Blon does it the best of anything I have. And that's why I say, well, you should really buy both, because you'll dig the boominess of the ZSX if that sound signature and that bass is your thing. Not quite as boomy on this, but similar, and you'll definitely like both of them. So better in some ways, but best of both worlds. Buy both, and you'll be loving life. So now let's talk about some of the things that I like about the Blon, sort of as a review by way of a bunch of music that we'll kind of walk through. And rather than going through, well, the sub bass and the bass and the mids, all that stuff without saying anything more about it, it's all amazing on the Blon. Just believe whatever I say, what other people say, that everyone says the same thing. It's pretty amazing for what it does, and no one really faults it other than saying the bass is a little strong for a neutral tune. But and maybe the bass is a little slower than what some people want, but whatever. So I don't think we need to go step by step through all the tones to know that it's amazing. So let's kind of go through some music, and I will say why these songs kind of stood out in my mind, and they sound better on this than anything else. So the first two, I call them the effortless. And what sort of struck me from the Blon from the very beginning is you'll listen to like a crappy mastered song, and somehow it sounds different and much better than it normally does on any other headset that you have. And for me, it kind of came down to soundstage and instrument isolation, and the way it spreads out even the crappiest song into something that sounds amazing. And that is sort of my number one why the Blon is special to me, is take a song like Kanye West, Power, and Radiohead, everything in its right place. So both of them sort of similar. They're very kind of dense, layered, electronic, I guess what I would go for. There's a lot going on all at once, and at the same time there's a vocal kind of in the middle of it. And on other headsets, everything will kind of mash together and get lost, and it kind of turns into a big ugly mess. So on the Blon, the way the soundstage is kind of set up for most songs is the vocals are sort of front, center, like kind of right in your face, like you're front row at the concert, but you're closer. You're kind of like in the booth with him. He's like right next to you. And then there'll be space. There's air around the vocals. So even though there's all this dense stuff flying around Kanye's vocals, all of his samples and all that junk, you'll hear him kind of front and center right in front of you, and then everything else gets pushed to the side, and everything becomes like crystal clear on the vocals. And you don't really get that at $38.99, $38 on anything else. The ZSX is pretty close, but the way the Blonde does it, I call it effortless. No matter what song you throw on it, it kind of does the same thing. It sort of unlayers and decomposes the song into instruments, and they're all layered back into this sound stage that sounds absolutely natural. You don't even think about what it's doing, because usually I'll pick up a pair and I'll be like, oh, okay, well now I hear the guitars right beyond my ears. There's the drums right, kind of at my ears, and the vocals are inside. With the Blonde, it's like totally seamless. It's just one soundstage, and you're not even thinking about sort of exactly where things are in relation to your ears, and you're just enjoying the music. And that is my number one reason why these things are special. You don't get that anywhere else. This seamless soundstage where you just forget about it and you're just enjoying the music. And so look for that. I mean, these two songs I picked because I just like both songs, but I think any song you pick, you'll kind of hear the same effect, especially even on vocals. These are kind of dense messes of songs, but Justin Bieber, Adele, pick your favorite vocal singer and listen to where the vocals are, where the instruments are, and you'll kind of get this amazing soundstage effect if you really listen to it and concentrate on it. All the technicals kind of melt away and you're just left with this amazing vocal that sounds seamless across, whether it's inside your ears or outside your ears. So amazing there. So the good, and these are songs that I just kind of picked out that sounded amazing to me, that kind of caught my ear or eye, whatever. So there's a new one, Deadmau5, Strobe. Strobe is actually one of his older songs that I think he redid for Where's the Drop. And so I'm not really a big classical music guy, but if you want to hear, strings, soaring strings, the high frequencies on the Blonde, that's kind of about as where I go. I don't listen to that much classical music, but this is kind of an orchestral addition to his the Strobe melody. So it's Deadmau5. So think about a minimalist melody with a couple tones repeated over and over. This adds strings to it, and it's a great version. And if you kind of want to hear at the high end what the Blonde can do, that stood out to me, which is great. So Jeff Cascaro's Love Will Find a Way. Fascinating song. You should definitely look this one up. So I mentioned the bass on this guy. So this starts out with a really funky bass line, and so not like an electronic boom. This is kind of more of a classic mid-bass sound. So you'll get a feel for that. It's really nice. And then he hits with the snare drum. And the snare drum, this is kind of where I say, well, either my foam tips or the copper works in a way to emphasize the bass maybe more than it should. And on the snare drum, you kind of think about the hard snap, the hard attack of a snare drum. And in my opinion, I think the foam don't really do that justice. It sounds pretty damn good, but I think if that was a type of music that I listen to more often, I would probably switch up those two, because it sounds amazing, but I would probably switch up the tips at least if that was my thing. So you get past the snare drum, which is startling, and then you hear his voice, which is even more startling because it's super deep. And I think that is kind of my sweet spot for the Blon, are male voices, because you get a kind of a depth and a richness that you don't necessarily find anywhere else. And I think male voices probably sound better on the Blon than they do on the ZSX. At least that song, anyway. I don't know. Something about male voices and the Blon just kind of strikes me as that is perfect. And I definitely like female voices probably more on the ZSX. But again, that might just be some copper foam tip happening there, as opposed to the male voices, which are definitely lower and more rich, and they just sound absolutely amazing on the Blon. So I suggest going after that and start with this song, because his voice is pretty wacky. So Steely Dan's Do It Again. If you want to know what cymbals are supposed to sound like, they should sizzle a bit, and so lots of cymbal hits in Steely Dan's Do It Again. If you want to hear what the high-end treble side sounds like on the Blon, that's probably a good song to test. So Sam Smith, Pyramid, Daft Punk, all these last two, again, the male voice. This is Sam Smith singing in kind of a lower range, so it sounds amazing. He also does a pretty wicked snap. If you're into kind of mid-range purity and you want to hear what a really good snap sounds like, it's actually like a multi-finger snap. Instead of like a one finger, it's like all of his fingers hitting, and maybe it's not even his fingers, but someone's fingers. But a good rendition of kind of a multi-tone snap there on the mid-range was pretty sweet. So Cole's Memories, I think, does a clap, but back to the bass. This song starts out right in the beginning. There's a couple of kind of electronic bass pushes. You get this warm bass push that kind of wraps around these other samples that are going on. So I love the song, and I kind of point it out every now and then, but give that a try on the Blon if you want to know if your bass is too much or too little. You'll get a really nice couple bass hits right in the beginning. More of a sub-bass rumble than anything else, but it kind of wraps around everything else. That's great. And Daft Punk's Get Lucky is more of a percussive bass shot with a lot of sub-bass, and sounds amazing on the Blon. Sounds amazing on the ZSX, and that's why I say, because I love that song on the ZSX as well, and it sounds just as good on the Blon. So for those of you who are wondering if the Blon had about as much bass as the ZSX, it does. It's just not quite as boomy, but it's pretty close. And so the neutral tuning thing, like I said, I usually don't like it, and it kind of pokes its head out in a couple vocals which sound a little small if you're used to a big U shape or a V shape, or I've been using wireless headsets, and those are like kind of more of a W where they really boost the middle. So Lady Gaga's Telephone, the beginning of it sounds a little weird. Her voice is kind of smaller than it should be, but I can't fault it that much because the rest of the song sounds amazing on the Blon. Fast Car by Tracey Chapman, that's kind of more of a, her voice is super neutral, and it sounds a little bit flat, a lot flatter than you've ever heard it on radio. So what can I say? The neutrals just don't really engage me as much as they should, and those two songs just happen to pop out, but those are oddball nitpicking things that I found. So that's about it. We're spent too much time talking about the Blon, but it is amazing, it is special, and like I said, it's also back on, there's another vendor on Amazon, the Inu Audio Store. Thank them for sending this to me and for putting it on sale. So if you're interested in picking it up, now is a good time. So thank you, and I will see you next time.